Okay, welcome everyone to the first session of UQ's financial literature series, Beyond the Paycheck, a series of webinars curated by young alumni for young alumni designed to elevate your knowledge in all things finance. Before we get started, I'd just like to quickly acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands in which we meet. UQ and the board pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging for their continued cultural and spiritual connections to country. So my name is Hayden Cartmill, and tonight I'll be the host for this webinar. I'm a member of the UQ Young Alumni Board for 2024 in the Young Professionals portfolio. And along with my fellow board members, it is our aim to connect young alumni such as yourselves with industry professionals and accelerate your personal success, whatever your background may be. This is the first webinar in a series running this month, followed by home buying, travel hacks, and smart money strategies. Tonight, we've got a very special event, and we'll be joined by Ian White from UniSuper, who's going to run throughout all things superannuation, how it works, why it's crucial for your future, and some practical tips to ensure you're set for when it comes to retirement. Ian White has been with UniSuper for over 9 years and currently works as a super consultant in Brisbane, a position he has held since April 2020. Prior to this, Ian served as an on-campus consultant for UniSuper for nearly 6 years. Please join me in welcoming Ian, and don't forget to submit your questions via the Q&A function, where we'll have a chance to unpack your questions. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks so much, Hayden, for that introduction. It's great to be here with you. Let's see if I can get my camera working here. Excellent. All right, a little bit coming to terms with Zoom after using Teams. So it's lovely to be here with you. It's wonderful that be able to come along and really looking forward to being here tonight as we look at some of the wonderful aspects of superannuation and how that applies to learning more about it and what that can certainly mean for our financial future as well. So I'll just quickly have a look at the information there. So in terms of superannuation, it's one of the largest assets that's owned by Australians today. And that said, many Australians simply set and forget their super, really only starting to take an interest as they near retirement age. So today's session is really designed to cover some of the basics and also to provide an overview of the steps for consideration to ensure that we all maximise our super and our retirement outcomes as well. As Hayden mentioned there, just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Also, reinforcing the fact that the information I'm presenting tonight is general in nature only, does not take into account your own personal needs and circumstances, so certainly not designed to be personal financial advice or anything like that. And I'd strongly encourage you to read any relevant product disclosure statements before you make any decisions around UniSuper products or services. Tonight, we're going to be having a look at the role of superannuation in Australia, the major types of superannuation that are available to you as part of UniSuper, but also interesting to have a look at those in general. Some potential ways you can also go about growing your superannuation as well. Some ways you can look at protecting your financial well-being. So it's fair enough to talk about growing wealth through super, but how do you actually protect that financial well-being? And lastly, what happens to your super at the end of the day? In terms of looking at superannuation itself, it is important just very briefly to give you a bit of a background about UniSuper itself. UniSuper is one of the largest super funds in Australia, and we do take great pride in delivering greater retirement outcomes for our members as well. Looking at the major types of superannuation that we actually have. Yes, a bit of background on UniSuper there. Looking at the major types of superannuation that we have, two major types are available as part of UniSuper, but also it's good to look at these in general. The accumulation style super is where your super grows through investment market return. Defined benefit, by comparison, is an older style of super. It's a formula-based type of super. And based on the type of super you have, there are different pathways to various pension options as well. Defined benefit is a very exclusive club. We're the only super fund in Australia that offers a defined benefit product these days. That's available for people that work for universities. The most common type of superannuation available in the industry is known as the accumulation style super. And the accumulation style, most common in Australia today, this is where you can choose where you actually want to invest your money. You bear full investment risk and earnings will fluctuate according to your investment choice. So you've got the ability to tailor your own personal investment strategy, and I'll have a bit of a look at that as we work through tonight. But basically with an accumulation style account, when the share market goes up, the balance goes up, and when the share market goes down, the balance goes down. Looking at ways also you can go about growing your superannuation. So there are two ways of getting money into super, and they're known as before tax and after tax contributions. And we strongly recommend before you make any decisions around rules when it comes to putting money into super that you do seek personal and often tax advice as well. The before tax contributions, these Commonwealth Government rules, the before tax contributions are known as concessional contributions in superannuation land. They're taxed at a concessional rate of 15%. And the after-tax contributions are those where full income tax has already been paid. The after-tax contributions go into super tax-free, and they also come out of superannuation tax-free as well. Now, there are various rules and caps on these, both before-tax and after-tax contributions, and we know nothing in life is without rules. With the before-tax contributions, there's it's quite a topical area at the moment, actually. From the 1st of July, which was only on Monday, of course, the new cap for the before tax contributions, $30,000 per financial year, and the after tax contributions, $120,000 per financial year. The before tax contributions are commonly known as salary sacrifice, which is a term that some of you may be familiar with, and also contributions that you claim a tax deduction on. And with the financial year just passed, that was obviously a very topical area as well. I was talking to a lot of people about how they could get money into super and claimed tax deductions on those contributions. And then the after-tax contributions are commonly contributions that you make yourself, or could also be contributions that are made for a spouse. As I said there, tax and super can be tricky, so seek professional advice from a qualified financial advisor if you're actually unsure. Now, once you actually understand the ways and the rules around putting money into super, one of the really amazing things to look at is how super can actually grow over time. And superannuation grows through a financial principle called compounding, where we get returns on returns. And the next slide actually demonstrates how these contributions can compound over time, and where you can get those returns on returns. And we look at a bit of a case study here with two very good friends of mine. One, their name is Reggie, and the other one, the name is Sue. So I'll just see if I can have a quick look here as to, here it is here. Okay, so Sue and Reggie are both uni super members. They're both 60 years of age. Both have been regularly topping up their super with what we call those after-tax contributions we saw on the previous slide. Sue actually invested less, but ended up with more. So Sue invested $2,000 each year, which is less than $40 a week. Reggie invested $5,000 each year. And even though Sue invested less money in total than what Reggie did, Sue actually has $125,000 more than Reggie. And the reason for that is simply because Sue had more time. Sue started 15 years ahead of time compared to Reggie, and gave that extra time allowed Sue to achieve greater outcomes than Reggie. And compound interest makes money grow at a faster rate than simple interest, because it earns interest on the earnings from those investments. And this graph demonstrates that the earlier the contributions start, the better the outcomes there are at retirement. But it's also important to know that it's never actually too late to start those off. And as you saw from that previous slide, there's obviously rules around putting money into super and how much you can actually contribute in 1 year. And also remember, once you've made contributions to super, you can't actually gain access to those funds until you met what's called a condition of release. And that generally means you can't access your super until you retire or satisfy another condition of release that way. So we've looked at the different types of super. We said there that the accumulation style is the most common type. It grows through investment market return. Once you've gained an understanding on how that actually works, you then it's certainly good to understand what the rules are around in terms of growing super, and also having a look at what the potential benefits of compounding could be. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm going to be giving someone my money, I also want to have confidence to know that those contributions are going to grow well over time. So investment options are certainly a very important part of the growth process when it comes to making that super grow over time. And the next slide on investment options certainly is very good at understanding how your money can grow over time. So UniSuper has a wide range of investment options. Our fund actually has 16 investment options in total. They range from low risk right up to high risk options. And all super funds across Australia typically have these range of investments where you can choose a combination of pre-mixed investments, or you can build your own portfolio with sector-based options as well. Now, one of the interesting considerations I really found that first graph quite interesting as we we're looking at the different age demographics of people. One of the aspects is that you can actually look at general timeframes of investments and things like that. And they often say that people who have a longer term investment timeframe in front of them often can potentially look at the general possibility of maybe investing in higher risk type investment options. And this is known as the risk return trade-off when it comes to investments. The higher the risk a person's prepared to take, generally the higher average rates of long-term growth they can generally expect to receive as compared to less risky options or more conservative style options. So high risk, high return as compared to low risk, low return. But in saying that, if somebody does want to take on those high risk options to target those higher levels of investment performance over time, there's also a greater propensity for investment loss over time as well. So it is important in terms of developing your own particular investment portfolio in your superannuation fund to be able to be comfortable with the level of risk you're actually taking, whether that's high risk, whether that's low risk, or whether that's somewhere in between. And there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to, I guess, taking on the best mix of investments for you. It is important to have those based on your own personal needs and circumstances. I spoke to a 23-year-old girl on the Gold Coast the other day, for example, and this particular person have probably about 40 years before they're actually wanting to retire, because we can't actually start to access our super until we get to the age of 60. So this girl actually had quite a long period of time ahead of them. And you'd think from a general perspective, even though what I'm saying is generally right, you'd think that probably be comfortable and take on that higher risk because they've got that longer term investment time frame to be able to ride out the peaks and troughs of the share market. But they actually want to go and put most of their money into cash. So even though what I'm saying is generally right, everyone's different. We've got our own personal levels of risk tolerance that we're comfortable to take over time. So we've looked at the accumulation style super primarily. We've looked at ways you can go about getting money into super, ways that you can invest your money. Also, another great advantage of superannuation is that you can also protect your financial well-being through super as well. And it is possible to gain access to various forms of insurance, which can be very useful in terms of protecting one's personal financial situation. So in super, you do have access across Australia to death coverage or terminal illness coverage, what we call total and permanent disability insurance, and also what is known as income protection or temporary incapacity coverage as well. When it comes to the total and permanent disability insurance, that's coverage for people, covers scenarios where people may be medically classified as not being able to work in their normal position or role again. The income protection provides does provide peace of mind in terms of temporary sickness and accident. And with insurance through your super, you can protect your income. You can also protect yourself and your family, often quite cost effectively. And a lot of financial experts do talk about the advantages of superannuation in being able to provide solid protection for yourself and your family. And another great advantage of having insurance through super is that you can also have the premiums automatically deducted from your account balance as well, which means you're not out of pocket in paying for that insurance. But there are pros and cons in having insurance inside, outside super. Sometimes, for example, people like to have income protection outside of superannuation because the premiums that people might have from a private income protection plan are generally tax deductible. But should you have insurance inside, outside super, combination of both, that's certainly going to be cognizant on one's own personal needs and circumstances as well. But in terms of protecting your financial well-being in superannuation, access to death cover, total and permanent disability coverage, and income protection primarily as well. Now, it's also important as we consider looking at ways you can protect your financial well-being to also have a think about what happens to your super at the end of the day. And you may not know this, but your superannuation doesn't automatically form part of the assets under your will. Your super's not usually covered by your will because your will covers assets such as your house, your car, your investments, savings, and personal items. And that's because your super is legally considered to be held in trust until you're eligible to be able to gain access to it, usually meeting a condition of release. And for this reason, choosing a beneficiary now could save putting that responsibility on your loved ones if the unexpected was to occur. And these are the different types of beneficiaries available. And by ensuring that you take control of this, it can save your loved ones time and stress by letting us know who you actually want to leave your super to. And there are two major types of beneficiary when it comes to superannuation these days. We have what are called non-binding nominations and also binding nominations as well. With the non-binding nominations, in a lot of cases that's usually more than fine, but the binding nomination, however, does actually allow people to have control. It's legally binding on the trustee in terms of where money actually goes in the event you pass away. So with the binding nomination, there's two major types there. We have what we call lapsing and non-lapsing binding nominations. With the lapsing binding nomination, that expires after 3 years and needs to be updated. With our fund, you can actually have a non-lapsing binding nomination, which doesn't actually have to be updated per se. So, so provided that a person's beneficiary is valid at the time of death, that non-lapsing does still apply. So they're the major types of beneficiary that that can be nominated, the non-binding and the binding nomination as well. Now, in terms of beneficiaries themselves, the major types of beneficiaries usually are your spouse, your children. If there's an interdependency relationship, if someone's financially dependent on you, financial dependents can also be beneficiaries. If none of those beneficiaries applies, it is also possible to nominate what is called one's legal personal representative. So what that means, in the event that a person wants to pass away, the death benefit would actually go straight to the estate and thereby be paid out in line with a person's will. There are various pros and cons in terms of nominating a beneficiary, and certainly obtaining some further personal financial advice to work out what is best is certainly very good in that regard. And like I said, all these things I've spoken about tonight are just general in nature only. If you want to work out the best way to go about setting these things up, what's right for you, what's wrong for you, getting that more personal and tailored financial advice is highly advantageous. And I'll talk a little bit about, in terms of our fund, the types of services that we actually offer, and also a lot of super funds in Australia offer as well. In terms of looking at next steps, it's often beneficial to register or access your account online. So that allows you to have good cover of what's actually going on with your super, and it makes everything transparent. So that's certainly a very good point of action to take. Like I said, look at reviewing things like your investment options, the risk profile you're comfortable with, whether that's high risk, whether that's low risk, whether that's somewhere in between. Working out, I suppose, as well, some general considerations around whether your insurance benefits are right for you. Do you have the appropriate levels of protection in place? In your superannuation, should you have death cover, total and permanent disability insurance, income protection coverage, combination of all those things? And also looking at nominating your beneficiaries. That's really important as well. So you've got control over who receives your money at the end of the day. What I'd also say as well, it's quite interesting as I go about my role on campus as a super consultant, as I go to various university campuses or talk to people on Teams or over the phone about the general nature of their superannuation. Probably around, I'd say, around about a third of the people I'd speak to don't actually have an up-to-date will. So when it comes to beneficiaries as part of that estate planning, having an up-to-date will is also considered to be highly beneficial. So you've got full control over what happens to your assets in the event that you pass away. And there's also some considerations that are worth looking at in terms of finding and combining your super as well. If someone has multiple super funds across a whole range of different providers, one of the trade-offs with that can be is that you're paying fees on various super funds. A lot of financial experts do talk about the advantages of rolling or consolidating to the one fund because you're only paying the one lot of fees as a result. Also, it's a lot tidier. You automatically know where your money is when you've combined that into the one fund. And also another prime consideration revolves around the fact that, and that getting back to that power of compounding slide that we looked at with Reggie and Sue before, if potentially having all your money in the one fund can mean that your super can potentially grow more favourably over time, because having a larger balance, getting those returns on returns may potentially assist in maximising those benefits over time as well. When it comes to not rolling between funds, why would someone choose to not roll between funds? That could be, for example, there might be certain insurance benefits with the other fund that might be important that someone might want to hang on to. If someone had a pre-existing medical condition, for example, they might find that maintaining their insurance with the other fund might be important, so they might decide not to roll between funds that way. There might be certain pension benefits with the other fund that may not necessarily be that they may not necessarily want to lose. So once again, a lot of considerations there around finding and combining a super. You can actually, if you do wish to roll to the one fund, you can actually do that through the MyGov portal through the ATO these days. There's a tool there that you can use to automatically consolidate your super to the one fund, and usually can be done fairly quickly in about 5 to 7 minutes. So highly can be a very useful tool, that one. Now, in terms of next steps as well, we recognise that First Nations people can face unique challenges when dealing with their super and the wider financial system. So our goal here at UniSuper is to provide excellent service and retirement outcomes for all our members. And we understand that some members, particularly those that might be in remote or isolated communities, for example, may sometimes struggle to meet standard identification requirements due to limited access to necessary documents. And this can cause challenges for some people when it comes to accessing their super. And there may be cases where we can't rely on traditional identification methods. In some situations, we may be able to accept alternative forms of identification, such as an Indigenous community identity card or a reference from a community elder, or a government letter that shows the member's name, or a formal statement from an eligible referee who knows the member well and can verify their identity. So if someone's having trouble accessing their super due to identity requirements, you can contact our member services team on the 1800 number there, which is 1800 331 685. In terms of how we can help here at UniSuper, we've got 3 major levels of advice here. So my role as a super consultant is to provide what we call general financial advice, where, as I mentioned at the start, we just talk about your general situation and circumstances. We've also got a service called Select Advice, and a lot of funds across the country have this intra-fund advice service where you can get personal advice on things like, for example, how your investments work, the best investment strategy, which I can't do in my role, but they can certainly do in theirs. They can help you work out the best mix of investments, for example. It might be to do with the insurance around your super fund, what the best levels of protection might be with the super fund that's held. And also it could be, for instance, you might want to get some advice on your own personal levels of contribution. UniSuper here, we also have award-winning comprehensive financial advice services available, where you can get a tailored financial plan based on your overall situation, both inside, outside super. And that's getting, like I said before, all of these things are worth considering, but getting that personal and tailored financial advice is highly advantageous. If you've found the information useful tonight, you'd like to have, in terms of uni super, you'd like to have a personal consultation with a super consultant, the QR code there, just click on there, unisuper.com.au/super bookings. Our 1800 number there, 1800 823 842, and also advice@unisuper.com.au. So we offer 3 levels of advice: the general financial advice, which basically provides financial education and literacy; select advice, which is the fairly basic and tailored advice around certain topics; and also comprehensive financial advice as well, which is designed to really look at every particular part of your financial position and help you work out the best way to set up your future moving forward. Also, one of the great features of UniSuper is that we do have an award-winning app. I spoke about the advantages of registering for member online before, brings you closer to your super. Our app is, I absolutely find that the use of this very, very powerful, just being able to look at your super balance on the run. So our app is a great way just to be able to keep balance of how your super is tracking, brings all your information around your super under the one roof. So yeah, strong encourage you to have a look at the UniSuper app and download that today as well. And if you're like me, you've got a burning passion to look at your super at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's a great way to go about doing it. Okay, so that has been absolutely wonderful to be able to look at those things with you. More than happy to take some questions now and be here to really drill down on the more specific topics there. But absolutely wonderful to be able to look at those things tonight. So fire away, ask me anything you'd like.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian, for that presentation. That's been fantastic. And I know I speak for all our audience that I've definitely taken a lot out of that. And there's actually a few things that I'm going to have to action ASAP to not only maximize my super balance, but also to make sure that it's going to the right beneficiaries in the future. Yeah. So I'd like to open up the floor now for about, let's say, 10 minutes or so for some additional questions from our guests. We've got some pre-submitted questions, but also a lot of good ones that have come through live as well.
Fabulous.
Thanks, so we'll start off with one here that's come through. And the question is, can my parents be my beneficiary?
Love it. Thanks so much. So can your parents be a beneficiary? The answer is no. So parents cannot be directly nominated as a beneficiary. Like I said before, I mentioned there briefly, and I need to go back and constantly memorize this myself, but commonly it's your spouse is your beneficiary, your children can be a beneficiary. If there's an interdependency relationship, if someone's financially dependent on you. If none of those particular aspects apply, it is also possible, like I mentioned there, and I'm not giving personal advice here, obviously, but to nominate what's called your your legal personal representative, I should say, legal personal representative. They are actually the executor of your estate, technically. So what you're letting the super fund know is that you want your superannuation benefit to go straight to your will and thereby have it paid out through your estate. But yeah, that's a common question we get on campus actually, and particularly, one that's often asked. So very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting us all know. It's not a common answer or something you wouldn't really think, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the second question we've got then is, what are the different types of fees associated with my superannuation account, and how can I actively try to minimize them, or what should I look for?
Yeah, no, I love the question. Thank you for that. So what I'd say there in terms of fees, all super funds across the country do charge fees, and they obviously vary from fund to fund. Without going into too much detail, what I'd say about our fund, UniSuper, we're renowned for our low fees here at UniSuper. If we're not the lowest fee fund in the country, we're usually in the bottom 2 or 3, so we have a very competitive low fee position. And obviously, the less you're paying in fees, chances are that's going to give you better retirement outcomes over time. And even a small 0.2% difference in fees can make a massive difference to the final outcome of your savings over time. Most common fees, to answer that question, that are charged in super funds are administration fees. That's usually a direct fee that's charged. Also, fees for insurance premiums as well are directly deducted from a person's account commonly if someone has insurance with their super. There's also a lot of indirect fees as well. So, for example, investment managers, when in terms of managing your super money, they'll often outsource, for example, the management of those investments to various external providers or investment managers. So there can be indirect fees charged with those as well. So with UniSuper, for example, though, we manage the bulk of our investments in-house, which does help to keep those fees quite low. So what I'd say there, and I do acknowledge fees are a very important part, doing a comparison between various funds to ensure that you're minimising those fees as much as possible, particularly when you're first starting out, I think is absolutely crucial. So a lot of you might be aware that there is a comparison tool through the MyGov portal with the ATO, which incidentally, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority are required to assess the top 10 performing funds in the country and also the 10 least performing funds. UniSuper has done extremely well with that comparison. I believe over the last 3 years, we've come out as the leading fund in terms of the top 10 funds being compared across the country. But yeah, do your own comparisons through the ATO MyGov portal. Also, various research providers such as Chant West, Super Ratings, they're independent ratings organisations which do assess the performance of super funds. On the UniSuper website, for example, under our calculators and tools section, you can download what's called the Chant West Apple Comparison Tool. They don't get any kickbacks to us or vice versa. They're an independent ratings agency. It's not personal financial advice, but if you want to see how UniSuper stacks up against any other fund in the country, a lot of the different super funds across the country as well also have access to these general comparison tools, which can be very useful to work out how the fund stacks up with fees, how they stack up in terms of things like insurance premiums. So minimising those premiums can be very powerful. And also looking at the long-term investment performance and all those various funds as well is a really good way to do that. But yeah, I certainly agree that the fee side's a very important question. And yeah, great thing about UniSuper, we have one of the lowest fees in the country, so we're very proud of that.
That's great. That's an awesome answer. Thank you.
Pleasure.
We've had a live question come in here, and
Yep.
The question is, how do I know how much super I should I have by the age of 60 or
Yep.
at each age? So, you know,
Yep.
what's the milestone?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. So the old adage, and I get this question asked to me every day: how much do I need to retire? And it's a very individual question. There is no one definitive answer. So really, the best way to answer that, it's going to be really depending on your own personal goals and aspirations for retirement. So how much someone's going to need will be cognizant of the type of lifestyle aspirations and goals that they have. So for example, if someone wants to travel every year, they're obviously going to need a lot more money to finance that than someone who might be just content staying at home and playing their casual game of lawn bowls, for example, or playing guitar or whatever they want to do. So that lifestyle aspiration that you have is going to determine the amount you're going to need. There is some general modelling though. There is the professional super body in Australia. They're called ASFA, ASFA, the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia. You can Google it. It's called the ASFA Retirement Standard. They say at the age of 67, which is pension age incidentally, that a couple to be living comfortably in retirement these days is a general guide. So this is just all very general. They'd need about 690,000 in today's dollars to do that, assuming that the mortgage has been paid out. Single need about 595,000 in today's dollars, assuming that the mortgage has been paid out. With the 690, that would generate an income for a couple between 67 and 84 of about $72,600 a year. For a single, around about 51,600, something like that, I think. And the research assumes that the mortgage has been paid out. You can take an overseas holiday every 5 to 7 years. You can take a domestic holiday once a year. You got cable TV, cable internet, private health insurance in retirement. You can dine at your favourite restaurant in town 2 to 3 days a week instead of having to go to McDonald's all the time. And basically allows you to maintain that lifestyle that undoubtedly you're enjoying now. It's called the ASFA Retirement Standard. It's just a general benchmark. I've been in this industry quite a while. That particular research has been there ever since I've been here. And what I'd also say as well, looking at various retirement savings calculators is also a good idea to work out how much you might need. UniSuper, for example, have a fairly new retirement savings calculator we launched last year. MoneySmart, the MyGov, moneysmart.gov.au. They also have a retirement savings calculator as well. Incidentally, MoneySmart are a wonderful organisation, if you're just wanting to boost your financial literacy in general, it's available free of charge to the general public. You can virtually find out anything you need to know, things like budgeting, all things super, various investment products. It just provides good education and financial literacy around that. So there is a very good retirement savings calculator on the Money Smart website, which I often use as well. And I'm just like all of you. I'm certainly wondering whether I'm going to have enough to retire. And I like looking at that modelling just to gain a bit of an idea as to how I'm tracking. And yeah, and the earlier you start planning, the better. There's no right or wrong age, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s. It's never too late. Starting that planning process and doing some of your own estimates through those calculators can be a lot of fun. I actually really enjoy it myself.
Some great resources in there. Thank you. So what range of investment options within superannuation would you recommend for a young professional to effectively take advantage of the power of compounding interest?
Love it.
And how should I, as a young adult, balance risk and return to maximize long-term growth?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for the question. So not giving personal advice, I would say from a general perspective there, if somebody's fairly young, new to the workforce, considerations, and most financial experts would also reinforce this as well, in terms of, generally speaking, having often conceptually having a higher risk type strategy can be beneficial for people that are first starting out, because the higher the risk a person's prepared to take generally, the higher levels of return that they'll receive over time. So or most super funds across the country, they'll have options, for example, like high growth. So certainly not trying to steer into that one. I'll recommend that over any other product, because I'm not able to do that. I'm not giving personal advice here. But if someone is fairly young, new to the workforce, look at those high risk options, because you've got plenty of time to be able to ride out the peaks and troughs of the share market. We saw the magic of compounding slide before, which demonstrates that. And to be honest with you, if you've got that longer term investment time frame and the markets go down, it's actually an advantage, because you've got those contributions going into the market when share prices are cheaper. Consequently, when the markets turn around, so when the markets are down, you get to buy more shares and units than you otherwise would. When the markets finally turn around, you've got the ability to be able to take advantage of those market upswings as they occur. And that's a financial planning principle called dollar cost averaging. So generally, longer term investment time frame you're going to have if you're new to the workforce, generally take on a higher risk strategy can be helpful. But like I said before, I spoke about the 23-year-old girl on the Gold Coast as I was talking before. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I totally respected their view. This particular girl wanted to go and put most of their money into cash. So even though she's only 23, you'd think generally they'd probably be comfortable taking a bit of risk. That wasn't the case for them. So there's no right or wrong answer here. You do need to have a mix of investments that matches the level of risk you're prepared to take, whether that's high risk, whether that's low risk, or whether that's somewhere in between. And that's known as risk tolerance. And your super fund, like I said, usually has an intra-fund advice service, which can often help you with questions like that. Our select advice service here at UniSuper, we're offering that at no direct cost to our members now as from the 1st of July, which we're very excited about. So have a look at those services available, and they can really give you great peace of mind for the future. And starting out earlier, having the right mix of investments, making sure you've got that working for you from your own person, but getting some personal tailored advice, I'd certainly highly recommend when it comes to looking at investment strategies.
Great answer. Awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So we've probably got time for one or two more questions.
Yeah,
so we'll just round it out here.
No worries.
Through COVID, we saw a bunch of opportunities to be able to withdraw super early. So under what circumstances now can an individual access superannuation before retirement age? And are there any potential penalties or consequences for doing so?
Sure. No, thanks so much for that question as well. So there are some very rare and extenuating circumstances in Australia where people can potentially access this super before preservation age or retirement age. One of those, probably the most common one, to be honest with you, is called compassionate grounds release. So that's governed by the Australian Taxation Office. They're the ones that drive that. So there are particular circumstances sometimes. For example, let's say, sadly, a financial institution was about to foreclose on a person's mortgage. There are provisions through superannuation under compassionate grounds through the ATO to have super released early to cover scenarios like that. Things like surgery, to have modifications done to a motor vehicle or a home if there was a person or dependent that was had a disability, for instance. So there are provisions under compassionate grounds where super can be released early, and you apply directly to the Australian Taxation Office for that. And if that's then approved, they will provide instructions to the super fund to have that money released. The other form of early release is called severe financial hardship. And what that basically means, someone has to be in receipt of a Commonwealth Government Centrelink benefit for 26 consecutive weeks. And it is possible if someone is in that situation that they can access up to $10,000 in one financial year as a once-off release if they're severely struggling financially. What I'd say there, is that a good thing? Is accessing your super early a good thing? I've really been strong tonight on emphasising the power of compounding and getting returns on returns. And not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong. What happened over COVID, some people I realise did apply for that release. When you take into account the effects of compounding, sometimes taking out that money early can be detrimental. So if someone was struggling financially, for example, and they were looking at accessing super early, I would strongly recommend, as I've emphasised right throughout tonight, getting some personal and tailored financial advice first, because it can be detrimental sometimes if you look at the effects that, I mean, compounding, we saw in that case study what the powerful effects can be. So what I'd say there, as a general rule, without giving financial advice, having money released from super early should be done with caution, and having the appropriate guidance first, getting some personal tailored advice beforehand, I'd say is the best way to go there.
Yeah, that's some great general advice, and it's good to know that the opportunity is there if the personal circumstance does arrive. So our final question then is, how can an Australian permanent resident who is planning to leave Australia permanently have access to their superannuation in the future? Is that available?
Yep. Yeah, I love the question. So if someone's a permanent resident of Australia, or an Australian citizen, their superannuation is preserved in the Australian super system until the age of 60 now. So if someone is a permanent resident, they maintain that permanent residency status. Their super will be preserved in the Australian super system until age 60. So what I'd say in that situation, if someone's a permanent resident and they're looking at going overseas for a long time, it's a good idea. So basically the money will remain with the super fund. The super fund will look after that money. They'll invest it just like they do all other super across Australia. That fund will aim to get the best possible investment return that they can for you. What I'd also say, it's a good idea to regularly engage with your super fund if you're living overseas. Dial the 61 international code and ring us up and have a chat to us, because we love to talk to expats overseas, and we love to hear about what's happening on a global level. So we're a very friendly bunch in the super industry. We love to talk to you. So consult your super fund regularly. If your address changes, make sure you keep it updated so your super doesn't become lost, for example. And regularly engage with your fund if you're living overseas. But if you're a permanent resident, you enjoy all the same wonderful tax concessions that all other Australians receive. In particular, if you do draw down super after age 60, it's all tax-free. So Australian citizen, permanent resident, your super's treated the same way. If someone actually loses that permanent residency status and they're regarded and they what is called an eligible temporary resident, there are provisions available under Commonwealth Government rules where super can be taken with them to their country or their own domicile or country that they come from. So that's known as, on the basis, it's called a departing Australian superannuation payment. We call it a DASP. That is more for people who are here on a temporary basis. But in terms of permanent residency, which what that question was aimed at, your super just remains preserved in the system until 60. So if that's you, if you're 30 and you're planning on going overseas for 30 years and getting your super when you're 60, more power to you is all I can say. But regularly engage with your super fund. You can also, through BPay with an Australian bank account, if you want to make contributions, not the after-tax non-concessional contributions I spoke about before. If you want to make that while you're overseas and BPay some contributions, nothing to stop you doing that either. If you're wanting to enjoy the generous Australian tax concessions that super gets, it's the most concessionally taxed investment in the nation. You only ever pay 15% tax on super as compared to the average Australian tax rate, which is over 30%. So super does enjoy very generous tax concessions. If you do want to make contributions while overseas, you can usually BPay those. But if someone here in the audience is thinking of going to live overseas, all I can say, I hope it's absolutely wonderful for you and you enjoy the country that you're planning to go to. I've had the travel bug lately. I've done some travel to Southeast Asia recently, and I must say I really enjoyed it. So I think I'm starting to launch into the travel bug again, so I can totally relate to where that question's coming from.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Ian. Well, that brings us to a close this evening. And thank you again, Ian, for the presentation, but also for the insightful Q&A. It was great to hear from our audience and from you to answer all their burning questions too. Before all our guests depart, I'd just like to remind you that we have 3 events coming up in the coming weeks for the remainder of the Beyond the Paycheck series. So if you enjoyed this one, stay tuned for the coming weeks. Join us next week for a lunchtime session on Home Buying 101 with Claire Green, mortgage broker at Fourfold Mortgage Consulting. Claire will break down the essential terms and concepts every prospective homeowner needs to know. Next, we have expert tips to save money when traveling. So on theme, Ian, with the travel bug. And that'll be presented by Flight Centre Travel Group. If you're looking to get away and on the hunt for tips and tricks to maximize your travel budget, this is the session for you. Lastly, join Courtney Crawford, financial planner at Financial Aspirations, for smart money strategies. Whether you're new to budgeting or looking to refine your skills, Courtney will provide tools and insights to help you take control of your finances. Don't miss these opportunities to boost your financial well-being and upskill. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.